My next guest coming up is Ken Cherry. He is the author of The Mark Slade Investigates the Stephenville UFO novel. He is the former MUFON director for Texas, and he was on the scene in 2008 when the Stephenville UFO made its appearance on the scene, and this was a huge sighting. My personal opinion is that this was the probably the best documented and the largest scale UFO sighting or approach that we've had to date, at least in the United States, to my knowledge. So Ken, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm glad to be here.
Thanks. Yeah. So you tolerated my bantering for a little while. I had you on the line there for a bit.
I didn't catch it all, but one of our investigators, and I really shouldn't mention his name. Anyway, his granddaughter was there at the Parkland school during the massacre, and I know that they came in and offered her and all of her friends there counseling at. It's just a devastating effect on, her parents, her grandparents, and the community at large. And so, I really didn't catch the gist of what Alex Jones was trying to get across, but certainly this was a very real event for everybody that was there and was a victim of this insanity. So, I think these are the type of events that are easy for these sort of provocateurs to come along and try to make a buck off of them. Unfortunately, I think there was a saying around one of the previous White Houses: "Don't let any tragedy go away. Should not be wasted." So. There's an opportunity there to make some sort of political hay. So it just depends on what you're peddling, I suppose. But
yeah,
anyway,
I think the worst part. Yeah, the worst part for me is the inhumanity of it. And that you're basically shepherding people to believe in things that are really hurtful towards other people. And I think that's what really gets me upset the most. And because Alex Jones, for one example, I just kind of picked on him tonight, but he has millions of followers, so he has a very real influence on Americans.
Well, he has a lot of listeners, that's for sure. And of course, the man with the gun showing up at the pizza parlor does show that he does have some influence among the fringe loonies. But I think I got to give most people credit and believe that they look at the man as primarily an entertainer. Now, that's not to say that there aren't conspiracies that exist. And, of course, my field of ufology is just rampant with, conspiracy theories, but some of them are pretty well founded. It can be documented as to, the origins from government programs that were designed to misinform and cover up activities relating to what they consider to be sensitive information about UFOs and some of the things they've done, of course.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting thing to talk about, because in the world that we explore, as far as alternative in the way of paranormal ufology, etc., we do. Like yourself, you get sources of information, and you can't give away those sources, right? So you have to say, my source told me this. But what I notice with some people is that, every other word it's, my source, someone told me this. I heard this from so and so. I heard that, and I begin to start doubting them. because it's like when you speak too much, I feel like you're on the you're trying to deflect from any real critique. Whereas like yourself, I know that you've had your sources during the period of the Stephenville, and I'm guessing probably after, which informed your understanding of the UFO phenomena. And I take your word on that because, you are sober in your approach. It's not, you're not out there trying to, stoke the fires and just to make millions. I mean, you really care about this stuff, and it's meaningful to you, and it always comes across that way to me.
Well, let me be clear about one thing. There is no money in this pursuit. If anything, it has cost me a great deal of money. During the Stephenville active investigation with MUFON, there was a 1-year period where my personal income from a business that I own dropped from a healthy 6 figures down to barely enough to pay my property taxes. So, I mean, it was all consuming. And, I mean, between the phone ringing day and night and, interviews and that sort of thing, and coordinating the specialists that we had working on the case and the investigators, we had 24 or so people over a period of a year involved in that investigation, ranging from, scientists to that did research on some of the photographs that we had from witnesses and various things. But at any rate, no. I don't take anything for granted until I have more than one source that is unrelated, and I kind of take the information and take it down, and put it in the box for that particular piece of data, and then if I get confirmation from one or two other sources, then I give it some credibility. And there were a number of instances where, from all of the massive amount of publicity that the Stephenville event gained for such a long period of time, I received phone calls from people from various government agencies and people purporting to be from government agencies. Some that I met, some, frankly, that I got to know quite well, and others that I knew by name and reputation, where you could Google them and find that they had a long history of government work and, were legitimate scientists, for instance. So one by one, I would hear similar stories from different sources, and it began to paint a very clear picture of, what had taken place and what really is at stake.
And this is the UFO, the incident, the Stephenville UFO incident.
Not only the UFO incident in Stephenville, but really the meaning behind it, and the history of this cover-up that has taken place in our country now for 70 years or so. So it was quite sobering, as a matter of fact. So at any rate, one thing that I do walk away with is that there must be, from the various agencies and scientists that I spoke with, thousands and thousands of people in this country that have intimate knowledge of really the reverse engineered technology that our government has possession of and has developed over the last 70 or so years, and managed to keep it secret. It's amazing, and very much like the secrecy surrounding the development of the first atomic bomb, of course. So there's many implications to that sighting. But go ahead.
Yeah, what would they be hiding? What kind of technology do you think they actually have?
Well, let me tell you, I'll try to be brief, a story from one very, very trusted source. This gentleman is one of the characters in my book. His name is Drake. Very real. As a young man, he joined the OSS, and during World War II, it worked with General MacArthur. And during the war, they viewed a number of UFOs and some of the occupants that were brought down either accidentally or on purpose during the war. That's kind of how he got involved in this whole secrecy and the UFO question. When I really got to know him, he was an older man, elderly quite actually, and retired. But he had said that at one point he was the one of three men on a committee that have made the final black budget approval for the military. And one year the request came to them. It was so large that they just refused to sign it, and they had this four-star general sitting there in front of them and said, "Look, there's no oversight. This is such a huge amount of money that we're not going to sign it and approve of it until we know where it's going, how it's being spent." So he said they took them, the three men on the committee, to this enormous hangar. And in the hangar, he said, were all sizes of flying saucers, is the way he referred to them. And the general turned to them and said, "That's where the money's going." Now, this was in the early 60s. Can you imagine what we have developed since then in the last 50 some odd years? And so this is the secret they don't want us to know. NASA was basically and is basically a sham. It's a make-work project. I've spoken to a number of high-level scientists from NASA who are paid through NASA, but basically their job is working on secret projects, back engineering and working on different types of donated or retrieved technology. So what we have really in our arsenal is hundreds of years in advance of what the public is aware of. And there are other aspects of this that they don't want the public to know because they're concerned about the fear and the panic that it would create. Just the uncertainty, the stock markets might crash, the economy could become frozen, people of religious faith might react, would not be able to handle it. There would be concerns on just about every aspect of society. So they have a tremendous stake, on the one hand, in withholding the secret from the public. On the other, there are very, very powerful people, and this is part of the conspiracy, who are holding back this knowledge, so that only a very elect few get the benefit of this technology and everything that it means. I mean,
I always wondered, you know how people say that there's this longevity technology or cure to cancer, these sort of things. And I always wonder, I see these people who are part of the global elites, and I see them getting older, and I see that they have stints in the hospital and things like that. So I've always wondered about this whole idea that the cure to cancer, the cure to some viruses or old age is locked up only for these few people, because I feel like now, especially since everyone is on camera, is on Instagram or seen, and because of alternative news outlets, people are following them and keeping tabs on them. We see them getting older. So if it's true that we have these technologies, why don't we see them playing out? Or do you have an opinion on that, or?
Well, I think that the elite are very elite, and these are the type of people who do not, show up on panel discussions or dinners and that sort of thing.
So you think they're really behind the scenes?
Well, how many times have you seen a Rothschild on TV? So there are people who are at the very top of the pyramid that have the benefit of these technologies. But let me ask you this. Now, we used to have the royalty in Europe 500-600 years ago. They were the only ones who could that had the financial wherewithal to build ships. And what did they do with those ships? So they went, they explored, and they found other cultures that they could either conquer or trade with, and Spain, England, Portugal, the Netherlands, all these countries in France, and so forth, all became incredibly wealthy from the benefit of all this trade. So, it is man's nature to explore and covet, either try
covet
to
and
trade
hoard
with,
yeah
to one way or another get what other people have that they want. So I don't really think that mankind has changed that much in hundreds of years. So people who have this access to this technology aren't even necessarily here to be interviewed on television. I mean, I know that sounds kooky, but if you have a craft, as Ben Rich, who was the head of the Skunk Works with Lockheed, who Skunk Works was responsible for many of the black budget programs. And anyway, he gave a speech before his death and said that we have the technology to take E.T. home.
Now, I recall that.
And I know someone who personally asked him if he seriously meant that, and he said yes, he did. And so, if here's one of the few men on the face of the earth who would know that for certain, and if he said it, I believe it. And I know that we're not just running an Uber service for ET. So, what do you think we've been doing with those things for the last many decades? I mean, just flying around to get everybody excited about UFOs? No. Well, partly, and that's part of the conditioning program to get people used to the idea before, eventually it has to be disclosed. But in the meanwhile, they're out there, just let your imagination run wild, and it's probably happened where we've met extraterrestrials and viewed other worlds and other technologies and that sort of thing. So who says the elite have to be here? They can.
maybe they hit a certain age and then off they go. Or it could just be like. I mean, we're actually not too far from that. It seems to me. Maybe another, 30 years or so, we'll be able to start really rejuvenating our own DNA, especially with, the DNA gene splicing that we're able to do now with CRISPR and other technologies. But I do wonder, maybe we just got the propulsion technology, the spacefaring technology. It's like if somebody were to crash a cruise liner into the beaches of some deserted island where there are a few people that live there that don't know much about the technology. Even if they could back engineer the cruise ship, that wouldn't guarantee that they have they understand what the medicines are on board. Would they be able to back engineer like an antiviral vaccine or something like this? So I do wonder if we're limited in what we gained from those crash saucers and things like that.
Well, a great deal, actually. I have 3 sources who worked at S4 in Area 51, working on back engineering programs, and each of the 3 scientists said that they worked alongside aliens. So apparently, some of the technology we've gained has been through peaceful means. And of course, there is a long rumored deal supposedly that Eisenhower made in 1953-54. Exchange technology for allowing the aliens to abduct people. But aside from that, I know 2 of these scientists' names would be immediately recognizable, and they all told me independently this. So it's not that everything that we have came without an instruction booklet or someone to help us to understand it. Now, there are many different types of aliens, ETs, visiting our planet, and so not all of the technology is the same, and so much of it does have to be studied and back engineered, and it's one reason why some of it hasn't been duplicated. So you hit the nail on the head there in that respect, but in other cases, though, we have had help. And so one of the scientists gave me a manuscript of a polygraph that he took. And I remember a number of things that I recollect stuck out was, of course, that he had been threatened. His life had been threatened if he went public with things, because he was one of the sources that wanted to go public, but at any rate, he was threatened, and he did name a couple of other scientists who had been killed under suspicious circumstances that they thought were a security risk. And he worked on anti-gravity programs. I'm trying to think. One thing he had done is that he had inspected 7 different craft over his career, and he had told me that he had just come back from Japan, where a UFO had crashed near there, Sea of Japan, someplace, and so that was the closest facility to bring it in. And he was flown over as one of the scientific team to look at this thing. But he was saying that one thing that they discovered on board this craft was a liquid wall. That they
liquid wall.
They hadn't. A liquid wall that they had not figured out yet. So, some of the technology can be a complete surprise to us and upend some of our understanding of, the nature of our, existence. So,
reality,
anyway,
yeah.
liquid wall, right?
Liquid wall. Yeah. Well, and that's a good segue into what I was thinking earlier, and I really didn't mention it as much, because some of these things that we talk about on this program and other programs like it. I mean, and you and I in our private conversations talk about all kinds of other things as well that sound outlandish. But the fact is that you and I sitting here having a conversation about it, it's a safe thing to do. I don't feel like you and I, are causing any havoc or negative effects in the world because of it. So I'm much more comfortable
Alan,
doing that.
Let me interrupt you there because while you may have that feeling of security and safety, I got to tell you that I have been amazed at how much scrutiny and intimidation I've been subjected to for not only for the content of my book, apparently, which is pretty thinly veiled as a novel, but for some of the things I've said in the interviews, because my phone has been tapped, and that's been my phone, my television, and my computer have all been bugged, as confirmed by my cable provider, Charter.
Oh yeah, and, I remember that incident. Yeah.
Yeah, and they've made harassing calls to people in the middle of the night all over the country, displaying my phone number. And then when people, were awakened 2 or 3 times in the morning, then they see my number and they call and chew me out. I had 911 calls placed in with my number to the police department. I had my car GPS bugged. And I was, how can I forget? I had a dark SUV try to run me off the road one night. And so, I mean, there have been, and I'm just one person who obviously is for disclosure, and I guess even though I've tried to make my comments rather couched, apparently it's ticked off the wrong people. I've come under the scrutiny of the wrong people. So
I've bore witness to that. I understand that. Yeah. And from you as an investigator, I think that you have to deal with that much more than someone like myself who just sort of offers a platform and doesn't usually offer much commentary of my own on the subject. But what I was actually thinking more about was the effect that we have on society. Other than moving people towards disclosure, I don't see any real world negative side effects that could hurt other people, not us, but other people by having the discussions that we have, unless I'm missing something and you're more aware of that than I am.
No. My from what I'm told by some trusted sources is that disclosure will come whether the powers that be want it or not. And part of what the purpose of the mass sighting in Stephenville was to gauge the reaction of the public. In other words, to prepare people for disclosure, so that the more of these mass sightings there are, the more people get comfortable with the idea that there is this exotic technology running around in our atmosphere that our military can't do anything about, or at least the military assets that we know about. So part of a plan leading toward disclosure, but at any rate, I think that what we're doing is just helping to inform people and letting them know, hey, you might want to get comfortable with the idea. But I'll tell you something. There has been an effort to educate the public and to prepare them for disclosure ever since the Robertson panel in 1952. That was one of their recommendations of the panel, That panel was formed as a result of the mass UFO sighting that took place over Washington, D.C. in July of 1952. And they even mention in their report that, certain production companies, the Walt Disney Company, should be used, and so over the years with the Star Treks and all the various sci-fi programs that have been so popular on TV, I found that most people are very accepting of the idea that there is other intelligent life in the universe. Matter of fact, most people would. I think the anyone who believed that we were the only intelligent life in the universe would be in a very small minority at this point. But I think there's just so many other aspects to disclosure beyond that those are the things that the authorities are worried about.
Yeah, and the great thing about your book that I really love is, you read a novel. It's a suspense thriller novel, but in the back you have these appendices that really support some of the ideas that are presented through the storytelling in the back. Like you said, like the Robertson panel, mysterious murders or accidents that happen to political people or others who get close to the truth, as we say.
Right.
And other things like astronauts like Cooper, Mitchell. They are people who didn't go out there to make money. Telling a tall tale. These are people that are coming from an exposure to experiences and to agencies, being within those agencies, and coming back and just telling us their story. So, when you have, and like you said, like you're not making millions, no one's making millions off of this. So when you have people that can put their reputations on the line and they come out and say these things, you can't not pay attention to that.
No, and there are any number of astronauts, cosmonauts, and so forth involved in the space program that have testified, that they have had these alien encounters, UFO encounters, and some of the encounters that they describe are quite vivid. So, I mean, if we're to believe that these guys are nuts, what are we letting them in? Why would we send them into space for? I mean, I can't think of a more credible witness than an astronaut. And then, of course, I don't. There's no denying it. I mean, even as part of the disclosure effort, as you well know, the DOD approved the release of 2 videos within the last year, showing our pilots' encounters with UFOs, Navy pilots off the coast of California in one case, where these UFOs were showing up on radar, trailing this a group of ships in a naval exercise. They were there for days, and finally they sent up a couple of pilots to check them out, and they came back with camera evidence, and they had their radars locked on them and everything. Now, clearly, those UFOs didn't care if they were seen. They wanted to be seen. And they've demonstrated time and time again that they're technologically superior to our aircraft, conventional aircraft.
Right.
And so they could have gotten away, and yet they chose, apparently, ascribing
what is
intelligence
that?
to them.
Yeah, what is that? Why is there a tease? Why do they come just close enough so we can see them for a little bit, and then they're gonna go away? What's the point of that?
Look, we gotta assume that these are highly intelligent beings, and they've been visiting us. There's evidence for millennia. I mean, they found perfect depictions of UFOs on cave walls, and those folks didn't have a cable TV or Sci-Fi Channel or any of that stuff. So there's plenty of stuff in literature from all over the world during every age about encounters with the people from the sky and from craft that they saw that are just read like present day UFO sightings. So they are very patient. They've been here as long as we have, apparently, and so I think they're taking, they're in no hurry to make to land on the White House lawn, but for one thing that I've been told is there's hardly an inch of the Earth that we haven't explored yet. It's getting more difficult for them to hide their presence, and they don't really see why they should. I think, let me make this one point. One of the main reasons that they don't want to disclose is because people would accept that they're visitors from lonely, regions of space coming here. What it would be difficult for them to deal with is the notion that advanced, non-human entities live here among us. Underground bases, undersea bases, and, we share the planet with them. So I think that's one of the things that people are concerned, that powers that be are concerned about.
Yeah, I'm going to read something from your book, a couple of excerpts. So earlier you had mentioned there's a character Drake in the book that was based on a real life character.
Yes,
so he's in this
right.
Okay.
Go ahead.
He's in this passage here. Seeing that something was up, Slade jumped to his feet. By the time he reached the door, it was practically over. In a move that amazed Slade, Drake delivered a swift and powerful blow to the man's throat. He staggered, panicking, as he fumbled for his gun. Drake grabbed the man's tie and swung him around, swimming him violently into the room and right into the way of Slade's pummeling fists. The man, his nose now broken and bleeding, reached for his gun, but it was too late. Like a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat, Drake pulled an impressive piece of weaponry out of the inside pocket and pumped 2 bullets into the man's chest. Drake's very own silencer ensured that no one would come running to find out what was going on. The man gurgled briefly, and his eyes rolled into his head. As the lights went out, his final thoughts were of that long-gone Saturday night in Johannesburg and his scumbag of a father. He had no regrets. The man had been right. Death would occur in this room today. And then a little bit later in the book, there's a little something else. Barely a second or so after Slade and Edwards caught sight of the small entity against the door, there was an ominous and unforeseen development. The flashlights of both men went suddenly dark. Completely out of the blue and unanticipated, the pair was now plunged into total darkness. Out of instinct more than anything else, both men hit the ground, keeping their guns firmly fixed in the direction of the door, even though now they could barely see each other, never mind the door and the thing that was standing in front of it. So this is very, very adrenaline-rushing, exciting stuff. How much of your own actual real-world investigation was, adrenaline-pumping and exciting stuff for you?
Oh, almost all of it. I mean, as I said, I had a thriving business. I owned a small regional stock and bond brokerage firm. Mm-hmm. I was the rainmaker for the firm. I spent so much time on this investigation because it was just so incredibly all-consuming. And I have to say, even though it cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars, the people I got to meet and talk to and the things that I heard and know I could never be able to share with people left me satisfied that it was time and energy well spent. So
yeah.
No, I wouldn't give up the experience for anything. There's
Yeah, I mean,
really,
just to be that close must be exciting. Just to, you don't need guns and fistfights to be enthralled in an investigation so close to tangible eyewitnesses and real world information. That, I mean, you were on the receiving end of so much during that period.
Well, one of the things that really fascinated me was that I mean the news coverage just is absolutely incredible. I never knew there were so many morning news programs, radio show, and I'd be up. I mean, my phone rang day and night, because people were calling from all over the world. Yeah. And but the interest was just seemed. Well, I had one top reporter tell me, he was amazed. He had no idea the story would have such legs. But
well, I mean, the UFO was so low, people could see it with their own eyes, and it was gigantic. That
was the credibility of the witnesses was just unassailable. We had 3 police officers who were in different parts of the Stephenville city proper that came back to the station and were so excited to tell someone, and they just kind of bumped over each other's words saying, "You'll never guess what I saw." And it turns out that within minutes in different areas of, widespread area, they all had this sighting, and they sat down and drew a picture of this UFO, and they all agreed on, this being what they saw. One officer was on a traffic stop, whatever you want to call it. He was sitting there with his radar gun, checking the traffic as it's coming along the highway, which was kind of a lonely highway, so there wasn't much traffic, but it was notorious for speeders. So anyway, he said at one point everything just went completely quiet. He couldn't understand what happened. It was no crickets, nothing. I mean, birds, everything just like he had gone deaf or something. He said, I looked around and I didn't see it. And then I looked up, and he said there was this enormous craft just hovering over me. He said,
your heart
I didn't know what
to
do.
drop.
Yeah, and he said, just sort of instinctively, I pointed my radar gun at the thing. He said, I didn't know what to do. And then it moved as the gun registered something like 14, 15 miles an hour. And then in the next instant, boom, it shot off. It was just a speck in the sky. So absolutely incredible speed. And no sound. A number of witnesses, had military backgrounds, but politicians. We had constable. We had many law enforcement officers because they're out and they're observant. They're trained observers. Their testimony is accepted in court, and so. But there were just hundreds of witnesses.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of the arguments are that, especially in those, years gone by, that maybe these were drones and people just were not aware of drones yet. But size matters. You can't have a football-length drone and not hear it.
No. One of the initial reports was from a private pilot, and along with it, he was outdoors with 2 of his friends. One of them, they were a married couple. One of them, the lady had been an American Airlines flight attendant for many years, 15, 20 years, I forget exactly how long. But anyway, she had a lot of experience flying and seeing different types of aircraft. She'd flown on many different types of aircraft and so forth. But they all said that this was, something that was much, much larger than aircraft carrier. I think I remember saying that it was a quarter of a mile wide and a mile long in appearance. And so all of the witnesses were consistent in saying this was huge. I mean, they used things like bigger than a super Walmart, bigger than the aircraft carriers, and biggest. They, in one sense, they said it's hard to imagine how something that large can just loom in the sky. That's got to be disconcerting alone.
Yeah, it's also funny that someone would think of a Walmart to compare it to, if anything.
Well, when I was interviewed on Dateline for the NBC's Dateline, they were discussing what they've ranked as the top 10 UFO stories, and so when they were interviewing me about Stephenville, I mentioned that one of the witnesses had said that it was bigger than the Super Walmart. So you just know that they followed up with a graphic of this Walmart with these rocket thrusters shooting off into space. They had to make it a comical thing. So, I tell you, to the witnesses, when you saw their faces. And held their hand and got them to sit and write down what they thought and heard, and write and draw a picture of it. One thing, this is for people who don't know, Stephenville is right in the heart of Texas, and it's a rural town with fewer than 20,000 people. Main industry is dairy, and all these small family dairies you can't make a living off of 8, 10, 12 cows or whatever. So most of them have day jobs. They go do their chores very, very early, then they work, and they come home and they do their chores at night. So these are people who are the salt of the earth, hardworking folks, and for the most part, our witnesses were gray-haired people. I mean, let's face it, a lot of young people leave the country life because it's hard and they want to go to the big city. So I
can imagine they're reticent too.
No, as a matter of fact, they were all very forthcoming, and I think one of the positives of all of the media attention was that there were so many people, and with the number of people who were willing to talk, it made others less reluctant to talk. So we had a meeting because we had so many witnesses, we couldn't go. Typically, we would go and visit with them individually, but we just couldn't in a timely fashion. So I had 8 investigators with me at the time of the first meeting, and we had a meeting hall that had never had more than 200 people in it. They said that was filled wall to wall with people and reporters. They said they had over 500 people and they couldn't admit anybody else. So there was a tremendous amount of local interest, and all of our witnesses pretty much told the same story. Slight variations. Some people had dogs with them that were affected. Apparently, right off the bat, made them very submissive. Sound, even if they had been very big, aggressive dogs. One of them crawled under a pickup truck and so forth. So, So you cannot not believe these people, and when you have one witness or two witness or a group of 3 or 4 people together telling you something, that's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, as the number of witnesses who tell a consistent story grows, the more
Right.
and the more credibility it has. But when you have people from 3-county area, and I mean 3 counties in Texas could be as big as a lot of states, telling you the same story, then that is testimony that is court-worthy. I mean,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
so they have nothing to gain by it. But at any rate, it was a fascinating investigation. But one last point. So much media attention that my name was out there daily. Boom, 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 boom. Early morning, midday, newspapers, and then evening interviews and TV and so forth. Which, although it was a drain on me, the benefit was that people knew who to contact, and I got many calls from folks saying, "Are you Ken Cherry, the guy? He's investigated." Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Just a moment. Let me close my door, and they would be with some agency or whatnot, with
Mm-hmm.
a very informed person, and so it brought sources to me that all said, "Look, my job, my career, my safety, my family safety could be in jeopardy, but here's something you need to know."
Yeah.
And as I got the first few calls, I kind of discounted it, but as I began to get more and more people from different walks of life telling me the same thing, then, of course, that's when it begins to take on substance. Anyway,
I do have to wonder though. It's 2018, so about 10 years since Stephenville, and I think that was the last really big ship sighting, and I wonder if we're not going to see that at least for a while, because whoever is navigating those ships know that we all are armed with cameras with zoom lenses on them now, whereas in 2008 we didn't have the smartphones like we do, so prolific. So I do wonder, do you think that we may not see another big event again until the time comes?
Yeah, I certainly think we will, and I think that there are a number of revelations to come, and I'll tell you one. Let's put this down as a conspiracy theory.
Mm-hmm.
From the source I believe, but I don't have independent confirmation, is that President Trump has gained knowledge of these programs, whereas not previous presidents have not been able to. And he is aware that we have a secret space program and have had for many years, and that obviously he was not the choice of the powers that be, and so they've been waging war against him. And one of the things he's done is threaten them with disclosure, and people don't give him credit for being as intelligent as he is, but mostly he knows what he's saying. And something that I think that was made light of, that he was a purposeful act to threaten the powers that be when he said that we need a space force. That was a veiled threat to reveal our secret space program.
Interesting.
And he didn't say it once.
Mm-hmm.
He said it multiple times.
Right.
And I used to have a professor that said, if you want people to remember something, tell them you're going to tell them, and then tell them you told them. So, and so
it works.
3 times, when somebody says something, more than once, that it means something. So and particularly if they say it a second, third time or more, then you better be going, okay, I better look into this. So at any rate, I'll just leave you with that.
That's perfect. We're actually coming right up to the end here. So yeah, it's been a great conversation, Ken. I love having you on here, and obviously I love our regular conversations as well. So if you want to find out more about Ken Cherry and his novelization of the Stephenville UFO incident, fictionalized, it's called Mark Slade Investigates the Stephenville UFO. You can go to Amazon.com, click on it, find it, and there's a lot of great reviews for the book. So, and I've read it personally. So you're going to really enjoy this. And then once you finish the book, of course, there are the appendices, which give you some factual background to support the fictionalized story. So anyway, Ken, thanks for coming on again.
Thank you. I always enjoy our conversations. Take care, Alan.
All right. Good night, Ken.
Good night.
Yeah, that's it for Paranormal Now. I do want to mention before we go off the air that, one, I actually feel a little bit better than I did at the beginning of the show. My wife, the love of my life, had mentioned that I should probably cleanse after spending so much time speaking about Alex Jones, and I already do feel better speaking to Ken after that segment. But yeah, so why not do a little meditation tonight and get myself a little more grounded and centered again. And to all of you out there, thank you so much for supporting this program. And I'd love to see you on Facebook, on Instagram. Instagram is @Paranormal Now. And that's it. So in the meantime, live in the mystery. And we'll see you next week for my next guest, Mike McCaskill, to talk about ghost hauntings and paranormal investigations.